Well, hello there. I am here live, unplanned and live. That can be our new show, Unplanned and Live. I'm here just to chat about a couple things today. Did not plan to do any kind of live event today, and let's not even call this an event. We'll just call this a thing. I'm Guy Stevens, the Executive Director for the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. Just had a couple things I wanted to share with folks. A couple of things that should hopefully be coming onto your radar soon. And let's talk a little bit about it. The Keeping All Students Safe Act was actually reintroduced yesterday to the current session of Congress. And I want to talk a little bit about that and tell you, tell you why it's a good thing, tell you why I'm not as excited as I should be, and tell you how you can help, because I think this is really important. So let me just begin by saying that the Keeping All Students Safe Act, and I'm going to go ahead and share something here with you on my screen, so bear with me as I do that. The Keeping All Students Safe Act, of course, is a bill that would reduce and eliminate certain forms of restraint, and it would completely eliminate the use of seclusion. It would add substantial funding to help schools move away from restrictive practices. Ultimately, it's a bill that makes a lot of sense, that would help educators where they are today, that would help our students who are currently being restrained, secluded, traumatized. Some are injured, and some have even died due to the use of restraint seclusion. So in my mind, it's kind of a common sense piece of legislation that makes a lot of sense. It would help create safer schools for kids, for teachers, and for staff. And let me begin by just sharing with you a press release. And this was a press release on Congressman Bobby Scott's page, and it talks about the reintroduction of the bill. And you can see this was dated yesterday, and it says that today, Ranking Member Robert C. Bobby Scott, Representative Don Beyer, alongside of Senators Chris Murphy, Bernie Sanders, Chair of the U.S. Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pension Committee, and Patty Murray, reintroduced the Keeping All Students Safe Act. And it goes on to describe it, and it says this Keeping All Students Safe Act would make it illegal for any school receiving federal taxpayer money to seclude children, and would ban dangerous restraint practices that restrict children's breathing, such as prone and supine restraint. The bill would also prohibit schools from physically restraining children, except when necessary to protect the safety of students and staff. The bill would provide training for school personnel to address school expected behavior with evidence-based proactive strategies, and require states to monitor the law's implementation and increase transparency and oversight to prevent further abuse of students. And of course, this is not the first time this bill has been introduced, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. We see here a couple of quotes here from various folks. One thing I do want to point out to you here is look how many organizations and even individuals have signed on to support this bill. And if you're not and you want to endorse the bill, then you can reach out to the committee and ask to endorse the bill. But you'll see here, of course, here we're listed the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. Many of our allies, many organizations that came out to support the bill, which is a fantastic thing. And let me give you just a little bit of history here. And again, this is not the first time this type of legislation has been reintroduced. We published an article on our website yesterday about the bill, which you can find on our website. And I'm just kind of going through this a little bit. But if we look at the history, there have been efforts going back to 2009 to pass legislation like the Keeping All Students Safe Act. So well over a decade, there have been efforts to pass bills like this. And in fact, the very first bill followed a report by the Government Accountability Office on the use of restraint seclusion. And that report, which I'm going to pull up on my screen here and show you, that report was titled, wait for it, Seclusions and Restraints, Selected Cases of Death and Abuse at Public and Private Schools and Treatment Centers. Really let that sink in. Over a decade ago, in 2009, there was a report from our Government Accountability Office talking about the dangers of restraint and seclusion, talking about particular instances where children died being physically restrained and secluded. This report, of course, got a lot of attention in the media, got some people moving forward to look at the problem of restraint and seclusion. And in fact, at that time, there was an effort to pass federal law around restraint and seclusion. Unfortunately, that law has not passed. And to date, we've introduced the Keeping All Students Safe Act and several other attempts to pass federal legislation that have not passed. So while I'm very excited about the bill, I'm also a little discouraged that year after year we're coming back and we're not making progress. So the question is, what do we do to change that? How do we move beyond, it's not good enough just to put a bill forward and say, hey, we've got a great bill. And I would say the Keeping All Students Safe Act is a very good bill. It was a very good bill that had a lot of co-sponsors last year. It did not see the light of day. It did not pass. It did not move forward in a substantive way. So it was a great bill, but a bill that hasn't moved. The bill this year is exactly the same. The bill last year did not move. So I have concerns about whether or not the bill will move this year, when in fact, it's probably even a little less friendly to a bill like this moving forward. Now, I will say to you that, in my opinion, and this is a very strong opinion, this should not be a partisan issue. When we look at restraint and seclusion, which disproportionately affects children with disabilities, Black and brown children, kids with a trauma history, very young children, this should not be a partisan issue. When we look at this, we see 80% of restraints, 77% of seclusions, kids with disabilities. That's with the very best data we have, which is not very good. Often when I look at state data, it's 90, 95%, almost entirely children with disabilities. This is a failure to accommodate children's needs. We have to do better. We can't simply restrain and seclude kids because we have not been successful in meeting their needs. So this should not be a partisan issue. This should not be a Democratic issue, a Republican issue. This should be an issue that is important to all human beings. We're talking about the treatment of some of our most vulnerable children. And again, kids are traumatized, injured, and die due to the use of restraint and seclusion. And today, there are far better things that we can and should be doing to support kids. So again, one of the reasons this bill has not passed to date has been that the bill continues to only receive support from certain lawmakers. We saw last year a lot of Democratic lawmakers that signed on, no Republican lawmakers. This should not be a partisan issue. This should be about supporting children and ultimately creating better schools for teachers, students, and staff. Because the same things that will create a better environment for the kids will also create better environments for our teachers and staff. And we know that. And we even know that staff are more likely to get injured when they are physically restraining or secluding someone. Anytime we can reduce or eliminate these practices, we're going to actually create better, safer environments. And we've seen this where school systems have eliminated or reduced practices, ended up with better teacher satisfaction, less staff turnover. Not only is this the right thing to do, it makes sense. It's a good idea. So again, one of the issues has been partisan support. What can we do about it? Well, we can reach out to all of our lawmakers and ask them to support this legislation. We can reach out to lawmakers and share our stories. And I'll tell you, there's a tremendous impact from sharing your story. If you've been somehow affected by restraint and seclusion, if you can get the time with a lawmaker's office, explain to them what happened, how it affected your family, show them pictures, have your child join you if they're willing. If you're an educator, go in and tell them, what your experience has been. We can change things. So one, I want to encourage people to do that. Why else hasn't it passed? Well, I think, we've had another issue, and aside from the issue, which often comes down to this idea of local control, which then becomes a partisan issue. We've also not had the unions on our side for this. So if we look at the national teachers unions, the National Education Association, the American Federation for Teachers, they have actually not supported this legislation, which I think is very common sense legislation. The best we have gotten, in fact, I got an answer this morning back from NEA, and they have decided that they are neutral on the bill. And what neutral likely means is that they will say that we're neutral, and they may or may not lobby behind the scenes in terms of trying to change outcomes. They shouldn't be neutral. This is something that makes sense for everybody. It makes sense for teachers, educators, and staff. We should absolutely be moving towards reducing these things, which are to create better classrooms. So what can you do? You can contact the unions. If you're a teacher, especially, contact your federal, contact your national unions. Let them know what your thoughts, opinions, and experiences are. I absolutely believe that the union should be moving away from these practices. So there are things that we can do. There are things I think we have to do. So we have an opportunity. The bill's been introduced, and that's fantastic. But unless something different occurs, the bill will have the same outcome. It will not pass, and we will not end up with federal law protecting our most vulnerable kids. We can change that. I firmly believe that. If we make enough of a groundswell, if we can reach out to lawmakers, if we take action, we can influence change. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. I also have no doubt that at some point legislation like this will pass, but the longer we wait, the more families, the more children, the more educators are affected. So, what can you do? Of course, I encourage you, reach out to the unions if you're an educator. Even if you're not, reach out, share your opinion. You can also go to our website. This article has a take action form. It makes it super easy for you to reach out to your federal representatives. Reach out, share your thoughts about the Keeping All Students Safe Act. We can absolutely make a difference here. Just want to encourage you to do the things that we can, because this can make a difference. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap this up pretty quickly. I didn't really plan to do a live event, but I do want to let everybody know that the bill has been reintroduced, which again, that's a great thing. It's a great thing the bill is out there. But I can assure you it will go nowhere unless we act. We have to take action. We have to contact our elected officials. We have to share our stories. We have to reach out to those that are in opposition of this bill. We have to work and collaborate together. Otherwise, the bill will not move forward. We will not end up with federal protections, and we should. This is a civil rights issue. It's a human rights issue. It's a disability rights issue. And our children's rights should not vary as they move from state to state, from school to school. We have to protect our children. And this is a common sense and important bill. One of the things that this bill does, it doesn't just ban things, it actually adds funding to help promote better ways of supporting teachers and students. Why a teachers union would not support a bill that wants to bring funding in to lead to positive change is beyond me. Why elected officials would not want to support a bill that can help bring about positive change is beyond me. We've got to do better. I have a firm belief that if we can do better, we have an obligation to do so. We can here, but it's going to take all of us to do this. We have got to take action. We can't sit on the sidelines. We can't think somebody else is going to make a phone call, somebody else is going to send a letter. Without getting our voices out there, we're not going to see progress. So all that said, it's great news that we have this bill. But I need everyone to really think about what you can do to make a difference and know that we have power. We have power when we exercise it to inform change. So with that, I want to thank you for maybe joining me for a few minutes today. I need to go pick my daughter up from school. So I'm going to drop off of here. But I want to thank everybody that's part of our community, everyone who's out there that is pushing for change. It's going to be beneficial to all. And when I say all, I mean even beyond, beyond. It's not just about our kids. It's not just about other kids. It's about the future. And we have to do better. We've got to treat children, humans, better and prevent kids from ending up in prison, which is the ultimate outcome of so many of these restraint, seclusion, suspension, expulsion. We're pushing kids down a school to prison pipeline. We have got to do better. Thank you very much for hopping on today, and we will see you again real soon.